Well, what I'm going to talk about today is one of the guiding principles that I use for my life. And I know that's why you all came, because you wanted to hear about me. But before we get there, I want to talk about my favorite creature. Now, I've got creatures that I really, really like. Pandas are probably my favorite creature. Most people like pandas. But if I wanted to be a creature, I'd want to be a bird. Because I would like to fly. A bird. I would like to fly. And I look at birds flying, and they hop on a wall, and then they hop on a pillar, and they hop on a telegraph, and then I think what it takes for me to fly, it seems to flying nowadays seems to involve taking my shoes off. And then waiting for 2 hours, and then waiting for another 2 hours in the departure lounge, buying over-expensive food, and then being crammed into a crate. And I know flying is a privilege, but for someone who's 6'6", it's not the most wonderful experience. So I would love to be a bird. I want to tell a story first. And this is a famous story from the Greek tradition about Icarus and Daedalus. Some of you may be familiar with the story. Some of the children may not be quite so familiar with this. But Icarus and Daedalus was this master craftsman. And he was asked by King Minos to build this labyrinth to imprison this other king. And he did. And this other king couldn't get out. But Daedalus, the craftsman, felt a little bit bad about this. So he told this other king's partner how the king could escape. And the king escaped. And King Minos, who had imprisoned him, was so mad. He imprisoned Daedalus and his son Icarus. But Daedalus was a really smart, clever person. So he created these wings out of feathers and leather straps, and he used wax to attach the wings to his arms. And him and his son flew off and escaped. Now, don't try this at home. Because if you look at old black and white pictures or film of people trying to fly, men flying with wings, they did not end well. They usually ended up in a big lake or sea. And that actually happened to Icarus, but Daedalus was a really smart man. He said, look, you can't fly too close to the sun because the heat will melt the wax like these candles are melting. But he also said, and this is a part of the story that gets forgotten, he said, don't fly too close to the sea because the water and the salt will also damage the wings. He says, you don't fly too close to the sea or the ground, and you don't fly too close to the sun. And there's an expression we have about don't get too close to the sun, and that comes from the story of Icarus. Because Icarus, the son, he was young, he was confident, some would say arrogant, and he flew up to the sun, and the wax melted, and he fell into the sea and drowned, despite his father's warnings. And in that story in the Greek tradition is often about arrogance and what's called hubris, which is like thinking yourself more important than you are. But I think the important part of that story is it reminds us not to fly too high, but also not to fly too low. So what's all this got to do with my guiding principle? Dawn knows what it is because I've talked about this. My guiding principle, after years of research, after studying in seminary, we looked for this guiding principle to guide our life. I talked with friends, I reflected, I read these great thinkers. And my guiding principle is I want to make brand new mistakes. I want to make brand new mistakes. And why is that such a good principle? Because by making brand new mistakes, I look at history, I look at the story of Icarus and how he was arrogant, but the story also says, don't get too close to the ground. Don't get too stuck in the water. Reach for something higher. Go beyond your limits. Because let's be honest, Daedalus could have just stayed in prison and spent the rest of his life, him and Icarus. But he tried something new. He tried to fly. So that's my guiding principle. I want to make brand new mistakes. I want to learn from the past. I want to learn from your experiences here. I want to learn from the great thinkers in history. but I want to be creative and try new things. And I ask each of you, what would that mean for you? What brand new mistake would you like to make? What area would you like to move into that you've just resisted moving into because of fear of not being willing to take a risk? Maybe fear of not being understood, maybe fear of being made fun of. So what does that mean for an individual? And then I ask as a community, what would this religious community, what brand new mistake would this religious community like to make moving forward? When we've done some experiments with the Action Sundays that we're having today, not many congregations would do that. In fact, I was at a ministers' gathering the week before last, and a lot of the ministers were amazed at what we were doing here and want to know how we did it. And I said, well, we were not frightened by making mistakes. We knew we would. Every implementation team meeting we hold, we said, how can we improve over what went wrong last time and how can we improve? So what as a community would brand new mistakes we'd like to make? How can we learn from the past? And then finally, what religious risk would you like to take? What spiritual risk would you like to take to increase your spiritual growth, to increase your capacity for compassion, your capacity for love, and your capacity to enact justice? So what does it mean to make brand new mistakes as an individual? What does it mean to make brand new mistakes as a community? And what does it mean for you to take a spiritual risk and take a brand new mistake for spiritual growth?